The warship appeared at dawn, silent, enormous, and utterly wrong against the pale October sky. Dr. Elena Morales stood on the observation deck of the United Earth Coalition station and watched its shadow swallow the stars. No one had fired a shot. No one had sent a transmission. The alien vessel simply hung there, a cathedral of dark metal and impossible angles, waiting. Elena pressed her palm against the cold glass and felt her heart beat slow to match the rhythm of something she couldn't name. Behind her, Admiral Chen was shouting coordinates into a comm link, but his voice sounded distant, like wind through empty rooms. She wondered if this was what the end looked like, not fire or fury, but a shape so vast it turned the sky into a question mark. Elena had spent 15 years studying first contact protocols, but every simulation assumed communication would be possible. She had memorized the phonetic structures of 12 hypothetical alien languages, practiced gesture sequences designed to convey peace, and learned to recognize patterns in radio frequencies that might signal intelligence. None of it prepared her for silence. The warship had been in orbit for 6 hours, and it hadn't responded to a single hailing frequency. Earth's defense grid was online, missiles primed, railguns calibrated. Every military commander on the planet was screaming for preemptive action. But Elena knew that fear made terrible decisions. She turned away from the window and found Admiral Chen staring at her with the expression of a man drowning in protocol. "They want a representative," Chen said quietly. His uniform was crisp, his jaw tight, but his hands trembled when he set down the data tablet. One person, unarmed, alone. Elena nodded. She had expected this. First contact wasn't about fleets or firepower, it was about trust, and trust required vulnerability. When? 2 hours. Chen's voice cracked. "Elena, we don't know what they'll do to you." She smiled, though it felt like lifting something heavy. "Then I guess we're about to find out." The shuttle ride to the warship was 17 minutes of perfect silence. Elena sat alone in the passenger bay, her hands folded in her lap, her breath steady. She wore civilian clothes, a gray sweater, dark trousers, soft boots, because she wanted to look like a person, not a soldier. Her only accessory was a small silver pendant shaped like a leaf, a gift from her grandmother, who had survived 3 wars and taught Elena that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward anyway. The pendant felt warm against her sternum. She closed her eyes and thought about the last conversation she'd had with her sister, who lived in Sao Paulo and sent voice messages every morning about her daughter's swim lessons and the neighbor's cat. Ordinary things, beautiful things. Elena wanted to remember them. The docking procedure was automated. The shuttle slid into a bay that opened like a mouth, and the airlock sealed behind her with a pneumatic hiss. Elena stepped into the alien ship and felt gravity shift beneath her feet. Not wrong, exactly, but different, like walking on a surface that anticipated her weight before she put it down. The corridor ahead was wide and dimly lit, the walls smooth and faintly luminous, as if the metal itself was breathing light. She walked forward because there was no other direction to go. After what felt like an hour but was probably only minutes, the corridor opened into a vast chamber. Elena stopped at the threshold and forced herself to breathe. The room was circular, its ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. At the center stood a throne. No, not a throne, something larger and stranger, a structure that looked like it had grown rather than been built, all curved edges and interlocking plates. And on it sat the alien. It was tall, easily 3 meters, its body covered in segmented armor that shimmered like oil on water. Its face, if it had a face, was hidden behind a mask or helmet that reflected Elena's own image back at her, distorted and small. 4 arms hung at its sides, each ending in what might have been hands or tools or weapons. Elena couldn't tell. She took another step forward and felt the air thicken around her, as if the room itself was watching. "Dr. Morales." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a deep resonance that bypassed her ears and settled directly into her chest. It spoke English, but the words felt wrong, like they had been assembled from recordings rather than generated by a living throat. "Yes," Elena said. Her voice sounded thin in the enormous space, but she kept it steady. "I'm here to speak for Earth." "You will listen," the alien said. It didn't move. "Your planet has entered the spiral. This region of space is governed by the accord of silence. Species that reach this threshold must submit to assessment. You will surrender your autonomy, relinquish control of your orbital defenses, and allow occupation. Refusal results in eradication. These are the terms. Do you understand?" Elena's hands were shaking now, but she forced them still. The alien's words settled over her like stones, heavy and cold. She thought about Admiral Chen's face, about her sister's voice messages, about the pale October sky. She thought about the billions of people on Earth who were going about their lives, unaware that their existence hinged on what happened in this room. And she thought about something her grandmother had said once, late at night after too much wine and too many memories. "Sometimes the only power you have is to refuse the question." "I understand," Elena said slowly, "but I have a question first." The alien tilted its head, or the helmet tilted at least. Elena couldn't be sure. "Questions are irrelevant." "Maybe," Elena said. She took another step forward, close enough now to see faint patterns etched into the throne's surface, symbols that might have been writing or decoration or something else entirely. "But I'm going to ask anyway. Why silence? Why an accord that demands submission without conversation?" For the first time, the alien moved. One of its four arms shifted, a slow, deliberate gesture that might have been dismissal or curiosity. "Conversation is chaos. Language breeds deception. The accord eliminates ambiguity." Elena nodded as if this made sense, as if the idea of a galactic empire built on enforced silence wasn't the most terrifying thing she'd ever heard. "And yet you're speaking to me now. To deliver terms." The alien's voice was flat, mechanical. "This is not conversation." "Feels like conversation to me," Elena said. She was stalling, she knew, buying time to think. But more than that, she was trying to understand. The alien's words were precise, clinical, but there was something underneath them, something that sounded almost like loneliness. She thought about the throne, enormous and isolating, and wondered if it had been designed for one occupant or built to accommodate something that had been separated from the rest of its kind. "You will answer now," the alien said. Its voice carried an edge, a warning. "Submission or eradication? Choose." Elena closed her eyes. She thought about every first contact scenario she'd studied, every negotiation tactic, every diplomatic strategy. And then she let all of it go, because none of it mattered here. This wasn't about strategy. It was about something older, something fundamental. She opened her eyes and looked directly at the alien's masked face. "I choose neither," she said quietly. The room went silent. Not the silence of waiting, but the silence of held breath, of the moment before a storm breaks. Elena felt the air press against her skin, felt her pulse hammer in her throat. The alien leaned forward, and for the first time she thought she detected something in its posture, surprise, maybe, or confusion. "That is not an option," it said. "Then I'm creating one." Elena's voice was steady now, grounded. She took another step closer to the throne. "You said language breeds deception, but silence breeds something worse, isolation. You built an empire on the idea that words are dangerous, but you're sitting alone in a ship the size of a city, delivering ultimatums to strangers. That's not power, that's loneliness." The alien didn't respond. Elena pressed on, her words coming faster now, urgent. "Humanity isn't perfect. We lie, we fight, we make terrible mistakes, but we also talk, we argue, we try to understand each other even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And yeah, sometimes conversation is chaos, but it's also the only way we've ever found peace." She was close to the throne now, close enough to see her reflection in the alien's mask, fragmented and strange. She reached up and touched the silver pendant at her throat, felt its warmth. "You asked me to choose, so here's my answer. I choose to talk. And if you want to eradicate Earth, you'll have to do it while I'm standing here trying to understand you." The alien didn't move for a long time. The silence stretched, taut and fragile. Elena waited, her breath shallow, her heart pounding. And then slowly the alien raised one of its four arms and touched the side of its helmet. There was a faint hiss, a release of pressure, and the mask split open. Elena gasped. Beneath the helmet was a face, not human but not monstrous either. The alien's features were angular, almost avian, with large eyes that reflected light in shifting colors. Its skin was pale and faintly translucent, threaded with veins that pulsed with bioluminescence. It looked tired. It looked old. And it looked, Elena realized with a jolt, sad. "We were told," the alien said, and this time its voice came from its own throat, soft and layered with harmonics. "That connection leads to vulnerability. That to speak is to expose weakness. We have followed this law for millennia." Elena swallowed hard. "Who told you that?" The alien's eyes dimmed, the light in its veins flickering. "The ones who came before, the architects of the Accord. They believed that unity could only exist through silence, that difference was a threat to order. We have enforced their vision across 1,000 worlds." It paused, and Elena heard something like grief in the pause. "But we have forgotten what it means to speak freely, to choose, to be seen." "Then choose now," Elena said softly. "Not because I'm asking you to, because you want to." The alien looked at her for a long moment, its eyes shifting through colors, blue, green, violet. Then it stood, rising from the throne with a grace that belied its size. It extended one hand toward Elena, palm open, fingers spread. She hesitated, then reached out and placed her hand against its palm. The alien's skin was cool and smooth, like polished stone. They stood like that, connected, while the ship hummed around them. "What is your name?" Elena asked. The alien made a sound, a series of clicks and tones that Elena's throat could never reproduce. Then it said in its own layered voice, "You may call me Ven." "Ven," Elena repeated. She smiled. "I'm Elena." "Elena." Ven's voice softened on her name. "You offer conversation. What comes after?" "I don't know," Elena admitted. "We figure it out together, that's how it works." Ven was silent again, but this time the silence felt different, thoughtful, considering. Then it withdrew its hand and turned toward the throne. "The fleet awaits my command. If I order them to stand down, the Accord will see it as betrayal. If I order them to attack, your world will burn." "What do you want, Ven?" Elena asked. It was the only question that mattered. Ven's bioluminescent veins pulsed brighter, then dimmed. "I want to remember what it was to speak without fear. I want to know if connection is worth the risk." It looked at Elena. "But I do not know how to begin." Elena thought about her grandmother, about her sister, about every conversation she'd ever had that mattered. "You start small," she said. "You tell me one true thing, something you've never said to anyone." Ven was motionless for so long that Elena thought it might refuse. Then it spoke, its voice barely above a whisper. "I am the last of my kind. The others who served the Accord, they were lost to war, to time, to the silence they enforced. I have commanded this fleet alone for 3 centuries, and I am so tired, Elena. I am so very tired." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them away and stepped closer. "Then rest," she said gently. "Let someone else carry the weight for a while." "I do not know if your people will accept me," Ven said. "I have been their executioner in waiting." "We're good at second chances," Elena said. "It's kind of our thing." She paused, then added, "Besides, I think we could learn a lot from each other. You know things about the galaxy we've never imagined. And we can teach you what it's like to be part of something bigger than orders and silence." Ven looked down at its hands, all 4 of them, and flexed its fingers slowly as if testing their weight. "What would you have me do?" "Come with me," Elena said. Back to the station, talk to our leaders, not as a conqueror but as someone who wants something different. It won't be easy. There will be people who hate you, people who fear you, but if you're willing to try, so are we. Ven considered this. Then it reached up and removed the rest of its armor piece by piece, each segment clattering to the floor. Beneath the plates, its body was slender and delicate, covered in fine scales that shimmered like water. It looked vulnerable. It looked real. I will try, Ven said. But I must give an order first. It walked to the edge of the chamber and pressed its hand against a panel embedded in the wall. The room lit up with holographic displays, each one showing a different ship in the fleet. Ven spoke in its native language, a cascade of sounds that Elena couldn't parse. But she watched the displays shift, watched the ships begin to move, not toward Earth but away, pulling back into formation and then drifting slowly into the dark. "What did you say?" Elena asked. "Peace," Ven replied. It turned back to her, its eyes bright. "I told them to seek peace." Elena felt something break open in her chest, a relief so profound it left her dizzy. She laughed, a short, breathless sound, and then she was crying, tears streaming down her face. Ven tilted its head, concerned. "Have I caused harm?" "No," Elena said, wiping her eyes. "No, you've done something beautiful." She reached out and took Ven's hand again, squeezed it gently. "Come on, let's go home." The shuttle ride back to the station felt different. Ven sat across from Elena, its body folded into a shape that looked almost human in its awkwardness. It kept glancing at the viewscreen, watching Earth rotate below, a blue-green marble wrapped in clouds. Elena watched it watch the planet and realized that this was what first contact really meant. Not the exchange of information or the negotiation of terms, but the act of seeing and being seen. When they docked, Admiral Chen was waiting in the bay with a full security detail. He looked at Ven, then at Elena, his face a mask of confusion and relief. "Dr. Morales," he said carefully, "what the hell just happened?" Elena smiled. "Conversation," she said. "We had a conversation." Chen stared at her. Then he looked at Ven, who inclined its head in what might have been a bow. "Admiral Chen," Ven said, its voice still layered and strange but unmistakably sincere. "I seek to understand your people. I seek to learn what comes after silence." Chen opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, he said, "You're going to need a hell of a debrief." "Probably," Elena agreed. "But first, I think we all need some tea." The debriefing took 3 days. Ven sat in a conference room designed for human diplomats and answered questions with a patience that surprised everyone. It explained the Accord of Silence, its origins in a galactic war so ancient that most species had forgotten it ever happened. It described the fleet, its composition, its purpose. And it admitted, over and over, that it didn't have all the answers, that it had spent centuries enforcing a philosophy it no longer believed in, that it wanted something different but didn't know what that looked like. Elena sat beside Ven through every session, translating not just words but intent. She learned to read the shifts in Ven's bioluminescence, the way its veins flared when it was frustrated or dimmed when it was sad. She learned that Ven liked Earth's music, specifically Debussy, whose impressionistic piano pieces reminded it of a place it had lived as a child, before the Accord. She learned that Ven had never tasted coffee and found the concept of caffeinated beverages both baffling and delightful. On the 4th day, Elena took Ven to the observation deck. It was late, the station's lights dimmed to simulate night. They stood side by side and watched the stars. "Your people have decided," Ven said quietly. It wasn't a question. "They have," Elena confirmed. "You're granted asylum. You can stay on the station, work with our researchers, help us understand the galaxy if you want." Ven's veins pulsed, a slow, steady rhythm. "And the fleet? They're still out there," Elena said, "watching, but they haven't moved. You told them to seek peace." "I think they're waiting to see what that means." "I do not know if I can teach them," Ven said. "I am still learning myself." Elena smiled. Then we'll figure it out together. That's the whole point." Ven looked at her, its eyes shifting to a soft gold. "You are not what I expected, Elena Morales." "Good," Elena said. "Expectations are overrated." They stood in silence for a while, the kind of silence that felt full rather than empty. Then Ven said, "May I ask you something? Always. What is your word, the one you would say to describe this moment?" Elena thought about it. She thought about the warship hanging in the dawn sky, about the cold glass under her palm, about Ven's face when it first removed its mask. She thought about her grandmother's leaf pendant, about her sister's voice messages, about the way fear could transform into something else if you let it. "Hope," she said finally. "I think the word is hope." Ven repeated it, the syllables soft in its layered voice. "Hope," it said. "I will remember this word." "Good," Elena said. She reached out and took Ven's hand, held it gently, "because I think we're going to need it." Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened. Ven began to change, not physically, but in the way it moved through the station, the way it interacted with people. It started small. Ven would linger in the common areas, observing humans as they worked, ate, argued. It learned to recognize faces, to remember names. It developed a routine. Mornings in the research lab, with a team studying the fleet's technology, afternoons in the observation deck watching Earth, evenings in the station's small cafe, where it would sit with a cup of tea, never coffee. Despite Elena's best efforts, and listen to the ambient hum of human conversation, Elena watched this transformation with a mixture of pride and protectiveness. She knew that not everyone on the station trusted Ven. Security officers tracked its movements. Diplomats questioned its motives. There were meetings, endless meetings, where people debated whether Ven was a genuine defector or a sophisticated spy. Elena argued on its behalf every time, but she could see the toll it took on Ven. The way its bioluminescence dimmed after hostile interrogations, the way it retreated into silence when people spoke over it or dismissed its words. One evening, Elena found Ven sitting alone in the cafe, staring at a data tablet that displayed star charts. The cafe was nearly empty, just a few engineers at a corner table and the soft beep of a beverage dispenser. Elena slid into the seat across from Ven and set down 2 cups of tea. "You look tired," she said. Ven glanced up, its eyes a muted blue. "I am remembering," it said. "The worlds the Accord destroyed, the species we silenced. I thought I was following a higher purpose, but I was simply perpetuating harm." It touched the star chart, tracing a line between systems. "These were all inhabited once. Now they are ruins." Elena felt her chest tighten. She reached across the table and covered Ven's hand with her own. "You can't undo the past," she said gently. "None of us can, but you can choose what comes next." "Can I?" Ven's voice was raw. "Your people debate whether I am trustworthy. Your leaders fear the fleet, and I cannot promise them safety. I cannot promise that others like me will not come, that the Accord will not retaliate." "Then we face it together," Elena said. "That's what I keep telling you. You're not alone anymore." Ven looked at her, and Elena saw something shift in its expression, something fragile and fierce. "You have given me a gift, Elena. You have shown me that connection is not weakness, but I fear I will fail you." "We all fail sometimes," Elena said. She squeezed Ven's hand. "The point is to keep trying." Ven was silent for a long moment. Then it nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. "I will keep trying." The weeks turned into months. Ven's presence on the station became familiar, almost ordinary. It collaborated with scientists, contributed to engineering projects, and offered insights into technologies Earth had never imagined. The fleet remained at a distance, silent but present, a reminder of what could have been. Ven communicated with them occasionally, sending brief transmissions in its native language. Elena never asked what those transmissions said, and Ven never volunteered the information. She trusted that Ven was doing what it thought was right. In the meantime, Earth adjusted. The story of the alien who chose peace over conquest spread through the media, and public opinion shifted. Some people saw Ven as a hero, others saw it as a threat. Most saw it as something in between, a complicated being making complicated choices in a complicated universe. Ven seemed to accept this with a kind of weary grace. It attended public forums, answered questions from schoolchildren via video link, and once gave a lecture to a packed auditorium about the ethical implications of enforced silence. Elena sat in the front row and watched Ven speak with growing confidence, its voice no longer mechanical but warm and alive. One afternoon, Elena's sister called. The hologram flickered to life in Elena's quarters, and there was Lucia, grinning and holding up her daughter. "Say hi to Tia, Elena," Lucia said, and the little girl waved enthusiastically. "Hi, Tia," the girl chirped. "Mom says you saved the world." Elena laughed. "I didn't save it alone, sweetie, I had help." "From the alien?" the girl asked, her eyes wide. "Yeah," Elena said, "from Ven." Lucia shifted her daughter onto her hip. "Is it true what they're saying, that Ven's staying?" "For now," Elena said. "We're still figuring things out." "Well, tell Ven I said thank you," Lucia said, her expression softened. "I know it's complicated, but I'm glad you did what you did. You gave us a chance, Elena. That's all anyone can ask for." After the call ended, Elena sat in the quiet of her quarters and let herself feel the weight of those words. A chance. That's what she'd given Earth and what Ven had given the galaxy. It wasn't a guarantee. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. The turning point came in late spring. A second ship appeared in Earth's orbit, smaller than Ven's warship, but still massive by human standards. Admiral Chen called an emergency meeting, and Elena arrived to find Ven already there, standing at the head of the table with its hands folded. "It's another member of the fleet," Ven said without preamble. "They are requesting permission to dock." "Why?" Chen demanded. "What do they want?" Ven's bioluminescence flickered, a rapid pulse of violet and green. "They want to speak with me, and with Elena." Elena felt her pulse quicken. "Do you know what they'll say?" "No," Ven admitted, "but I suspect they are divided. Some will support my choice. Others will demand I return to the Accord." Chen looked between them. "And if they demand you return?" Ven met his gaze. "Then I will refuse." The meeting lasted 2 hours, debating protocols and contingencies. In the end, it was decided that the second ship could dock under heavy surveillance, and that Ven and Elena would meet its occupants in a neutral conference room. Elena spent the night before the meeting unable to sleep. She paced her quarters, rehearsing arguments she knew wouldn't work, imagining scenarios that ranged from peaceful negotiation to violent confrontation. At dawn, she gave up and went to the observation deck. Ven was already there, standing at the glass and watching the second ship drift closer. Elena joined it, and they stood in silence for a while. "Are you scared?" Elena asked finally. "Yes," Ven said, "but I am also grateful, because I am not facing this alone." Elena smiled. "Damn right you're not." The delegation from the second ship consisted of 3 beings, all of Ven's species but each distinct in appearance. One was older, its scales dulled and cracked with age. Another was younger, its bioluminescence bright and erratic. The third was somewhere in between, its posture rigid and its eyes cold. They entered the conference room and took seats across from Ven and Elena. No one spoke for a long moment. Then the oldest one leaned forward and said, in that layered, harmonic voice, "Ven, you have broken the accord." "I have," Ven replied. Its voice was steady. "You have exposed us to chaos, to vulnerability, to the judgments of lesser species." "I have," Ven said again, "and I would do it again." The younger one's bioluminescence flared. "You do not understand what you have done. The accord exists for a reason. Without it, we are lost." "No," Ven said. "With it, we are lost. The accord taught us to fear connection, to see difference as threat. But I have learned that connection is the only thing that gives meaning to existence. I have learned this from humans, from Elena." The three visitors turned their attention to Elena, and she felt their scrutiny like a physical weight. The oldest one spoke again. "You are the human who persuaded Ven to abandon duty." "I didn't persuade Ven to abandon anything," Elena said. "I gave Ven a choice, that's all." "Choice is chaos," the cold-eyed one said. "Maybe," Elena replied, "but it's also freedom, and I think freedom is worth the risk." The room went silent. Elena could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the tension coiled in Ven's posture. Then the youngest one spoke, its voice softer than the others. "I want to understand. I want to know what Ven has found here." The oldest one made a sharp sound, a dismissal or a warning, but the cold-eyed one raised a hand, silencing it. "Ven," it said, "explain yourself. Why have you chosen this path?" Ven stood, and Elena saw its bioluminescence pulse in a pattern she'd never seen before, complex, layered, almost musical. "Because I was alone," Ven said, "and I did not realize how much that loneliness had hollowed me out until Elena offered me something different. She offered me conversation. She offered me trust, and in return I have found a purpose beyond enforcement and silence. I have found a reason to live." The cold-eyed one stared at Ven for a long moment. Then it said, "And if we order you to return?" "Then I will refuse," Ven said, "and I will face the consequences." The silence stretched. Elena held her breath. Then the youngest one stood. "I will not return to the Accord," it said, its voice trembling but clear. "I will stay here. I will learn what Ven has learned." The oldest one made a sound of protest, but the cold-eyed one raised its hand again. "You would abandon duty for chaos," it asked the younger one. "I would abandon duty for the chance to choose," the younger one replied. It looked at Ven, then at Elena. "I want to know what it means to be free." The oldest one stood abruptly and left the room without another word. The cold-eyed one remained, staring at Ven, and the younger one with an expression Elena couldn't read. Then it said, "The fleet will not interfere. But neither will we support you. You are on your own." "I understand," Ven said. The cold-eyed one stood and walked to the door. It paused at the threshold and looked back. "Perhaps," it said quietly, "you have found something worth preserving. But do not expect the rest of us to follow." And then it was gone. The younger one, who introduced itself as Kale, stayed. Over the following months, Kale and Ven worked together to translate Accord records, to explain the fleet's structure, to help Earth understand the galaxy it was now a part of. Kale was curious and eager, asking endless questions about human culture, human history, human music. It developed a particular fondness for jazz, which it said reminded it of the way stars looked when seen from hyperspace: chaotic, beautiful, impossible to predict. Elena watched Ven and Kale together and saw something shift in Ven. The weariness lifted, replaced by a kind of quiet joy. Ven had spent centuries alone, enforcing a philosophy it didn't believe in. Now it had a companion, someone who understood its past but was committed to building a different future. They spent hours in the observation deck, talking in their native language, their bioluminescence pulsing in synchronized patterns. Elena didn't intrude. She understood that they needed this, time to reconnect with their own kind, to rebuild what the Accord had tried to destroy. But Ven always found time for Elena. They still had tea in the cafe, still watched the stars together. One evening, Ven asked her if she regretted boarding the warship that first day. "No," Elena said without hesitation. "Why would I?" "Because you risked everything," Ven said. "Your life, your world, for a conversation with a stranger." Elena shrugged. "I risked everything for a chance. And look what it gave us." Ven's bioluminescence pulsed, a warm amber. "I have learned much from you, Elena, but the most important lesson is this: that courage is not the absence of fear but the choice to act despite it." Elena smiled. "Sounds like something my grandmother would say." "Then she must have been wise." "She was," Elena said. She reached out and touched Ven's hand. "She would have liked you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. And Elena thought about the word she'd given Ven months ago, hope. It still felt right. But now there was another word, one that felt just as important, home. A year after Ven's arrival, Earth formally invited the fleet to establish a permanent embassy. The proposal was controversial, debated in parliaments and assemblies around the world. But in the end, the vote passed. The embassy was built on the lunar surface, a structure that blended human and alien design, all smooth curves and glowing panels. Ven and Kale were appointed as the first ambassadors, and Elena was named liaison. The opening ceremony was attended by dignitaries from every nation. Speeches were made, treaties signed, hopes expressed. But the moment Elena remembered most vividly was quieter. After the ceremony, she found Ven standing alone in the embassy's central chamber, looking up at the earth suspended in the black sky. "How does it feel?" Elena asked. Ven turned to her, its eyes bright. "It feels like beginning," it said. "Not an ending, but a beginning." Elena smiled. "Good, because I think we're going to do great things together." "We already have," Ven said. It extended a hand and Elena took it. "Thank you, Elena, for giving me the chance to choose." "Thank you," Elena replied, "for choosing." They stood together, two beings from different worlds, bound by a single word whispered in the dark, peace, and the promise of what came after.